speaks, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert's stunned reaction wasn't just about Caitlin Clark saying, it was about what that refusal symbolized. Interview. Clark's rejection of the current CBA terms tore the lid off a conflict that's been simmering beneath the surface for years. At the heart of it is a simple question with a complicated answer. Where is the money going? Even as owners of the league is still in the red, new franchises emerge, investor cash floods in, and the media landscape explodes with WNBA visibility, all signs of a league on the rise. Yet, when players demand a fair, they're met with carefully crafted financial and an alarming lack of transparency. Clark's injury only heightened the stakes as owners scrambled to preserve viewership while continuing to suppress demands for equitable pay. Close face, this is a battle for the soul of the WNBA, one where optics and economic truth are on the line. The players' refusal to renew their contracts isn't just a bargaining.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
It's a call for accountability. By clinging to outdated structures and misleading the public, owners risk undermining the very foundation of their own success. The players aren't walking away. They're stepping, demanding a system that reflects their value and secures the future of women's professional sports on their terms. It's happening. The biggest standoff in women's basketball has officially hit a boiling point. Caitlin, the face of the league's meteoric, is refusing to sign onto a new, and the WNBA commissioner did not see this coming. Let's be very clear. This isn't just about a contract. This is about compensation, about the kind of respect that should have been a given the moment ticket sales exploded and viewership records started breaking like glass. And here we are. Clark's refusal comes at a time when the league should be celebrating its success. It's scrambling to protect an outdated revenue structure that's been wildly tilted in favor of ownership. You'd think with all the hype around women's, with arenas packed and streaming numbers climbing the people making that, the players, would be benefiting too. But they're not. The WNBA still refuses to offer its athletes the kind of revenue-sharing structure that mirrors the NBA's 50-50 model. That's not just an oversight. It's a conscious decision to keep players underpaid while the league cashes in on their labor and their star power. And what's the excuse? The league is not right. Let's talk about that. Owners have leaned on this narrative that the league operates that they're investing in not reaping rewards just yet. But that story doesn't line up anymore. Not with the numbers we're seeing. Match ticket sales, media expanding, franchise skyrocketing, viewership at record, especially after Caitlin Clark stepped onto the scene. Expansion teams are entering and investors are suddenly very interested in owning a piece of the WNBA. None of that screams financial instability. And still, players are being told there's not enough money to go around. This disconnect has created the perfect storm. The league wants to posture as a rising, but it also wants to hide behind the "we're still growing" excuse when it comes time to pay its players fairly. That's not just, it's manipulative. And players like Caitlin Clark have had enough. The irony here is almost too much. The same media outlets that have celebrated Clark as a once-in-a-generation talent are now quietly pushing ownership-friendly narratives. She's risking the league's momentum. This could derail everything. What they're not asking is why someone that is essential to the league's success is being asked to play under the same broken system as everyone else. 2. Clark's injury earlier this season only threw gasoline on the fire. Viewership dipped, and the league panicked. But instead of seeing that as proof of how valuable their stars are, ownership twisted the situation. They used it as leverage, a way to argue against against changing the revenue, against giving players more security. It's becoming harder and harder for the public to ignore. The WNBA's refusal to open its financial records only adds to the distrust. If the league really isn't, why not show us? If the money's not there, prove it. But that transparency never comes, because the numbers likely tell a different story. One where the league is flush with, but funneling it away from the labor that actually drives its growth. And it's not just Clark who's fed up. Other players are now refusing to renew their contracts too. They're unified. They're demanding a complete, one rooted in equity and respect. Press conference. This isn't about ego. It's about fairness. Because while the NBA splits its revenue evenly between players and the WNBA keeps its athletes boxed into a deal that hasn't evolved with the league's success. And the league knows it. The growth isn't hypothetical anymore. It's real. It's happening right now. But the old tactics are still in play. Spin the story. Blame the players. Accuse them of greed. Frame any demand for fair compensation as putting the league at risk. It's the same tired strategy that's been used to suppress women in sports for decades. Only this time, it's not working. Caitlin Clark refusing to sign is a line in the sand. It's a refusal to be gaslit by league executives who praise her in interviews and undercut her at the negotiation table. It's a signal to every other player that they don't have to, that their labor has, that they're the reason this league is growing, and that they deserve to grow with it. And Cathay Engelbert. It's also exposing how deep the systemic inequality runs. The contrast between the NBA's structure and the WNBA's isn't just a financial, it's a gender equity issue. It reflects a culture where women's labor is constantly undervalued, even when the numbers show they're driving real revenue. And let's be honest, there's nothing stopping the league from fixing this. They could adopt a fairer revenue share model tomorrow. They could open the books. They could give players a seat at the table, but they won't, because that would mean giving up control. That would mean admitting the players are not just employees. That would mean sharing. And so, they stick to the same playbook. Spread fear. Push a shaky financial narrative. Hope the media keeps parroting it. Delay until the pressure dies down. But this time, the pressure isn't going versus Dallas Wings, because the players aren't backing, because fans are paying attention, because the illusion is cracking, and what's underneath is a league that talks empowerment while clinging to a deeply exploitative status quo. This moment isn't just about it's about the future of women's, whether the system changes or stays, whether progress is real or just branding, whether the people who built this movement get to benefit from it or just watch as others cash. The WNBA has a choice to make. Keep up the charade or finally admit the truth. The league is thriving because of these, not in spite of them. And if they want that growth to, they're going to have to pay up. Share the, be honest, and stop pretending the house is on fire when it's clearly being remodeled with new money. So what do you think? Are the players making the right call by refusing to sign? Should the WNBA finally open the books and give these athletes what they've earned? Speaks. Let us know in the comments. Hit like if you're with the players, and share this with someone who still thinks they're asking for too much. And if you haven't, subscribe for more breakdowns on the biggest stories in sports and culture. This story is only getting louder. Don't miss what happens next. The shockwaves from Caitlin Clark's refusal to sign the WNBA's new collective bargaining agreement aren't just rattling the league. They're exposing it. Completely. Publicly. In a way that can't be spun or quietly dismissed with a commissioner's statement or a carefully crafted press release. Because when your biggest, the very player responsible for pulling the WNBA into the national, turns down your, that's not just a negotiation snag. That's a full-blown crisis. And it's not happening behind closed doors. Everyone's watching. Speaks. Clark didn't just walk away from a contract. She walked away from a system that has been broken for years. And by doing, she forced the entire league to look in the mirror, to see what happens when players finally stop accepting the bare minimum, while the people above them count profits and cry poverty at the same time. The league's defense? We're investing long-term. We're still not in the black. This is all for, but sustainability for who? Because the only thing the current model sustains is ownership power. It sustains media control. It sustains a financial hierarchy where those doing the emotional and cultural labor of building the league are always the last to benefit. 2. Let's stop pretending this is complicated. The WNBA is making more money than ever. From expansion teams and soaring ticket sales to sponsorship deals and national broadcast packages, the money is flowing. And it's flowing because people are finally tuning in, because fans are showing up, and because stars like Caitlin Clark have turned the league from a niche into a national conversation. And the players are being asked to buy into the same structure that's kept them underpaid and shut out for a structure that refuses to let go of its own narrative. That success is always just around that real profits are still, and that until players should just be grateful to be part of the ride. But it's not 2002 anymore. Players are done being grateful. They're demanding answers. They want to know how much money the league is really making. They want to know where the revenue is going. And they want to know why, despite record-breaking, the revenue-sharing model still looks like it did before half the country could even name a WNBA player. And here's where the league's excuses completely fall apart. Because if things are really that dire, how do you explain the new expansion teams? How do you explain the influx of investor capital? How do you explain rising franchise valuations and soaring demand for team ownership? Why would anyone invest millions in a failing league? Spoiler alert, they wouldn't. The only logical conclusion is that the WNBA is not operating at all, but it's choosing to act like it is. Why? Because it gives ownership cover. It gives them a way to justify low salaries and resist player demands without looking like the bad guys. It gives them a narrative to push through one that makes the players look greedy and makes themselves look like just trying to keep the league. It's pure. And the media? Most of them are playing right along. Articles run with the league's talking points without demanding, without questioning them, without asking why a league, supposedly on the brink of collapse, is suddenly expanding into new markets and signing new TV deals. They paint players like Clark as risky, as if asking for transparency and equity is some irresponsible gamble rather than the bare minimum of any professional sports league worth taking seriously. Caitlin Clark's injury only made it worse. Her absence led to an undeniable dip in, and instead of using that as an opportunity to acknowledge her worth and address the league's dependence on star ownership, weaponized it. This is why we can't invest too much. One injury, and it all goes south. But if one player's injury is enough to crater the momentum of an entire, that's not a reason to pay less. It's a flashing red siren that the league is doing everything wrong. You don't respond to that kind of fragility by doubling down on secrecy and control. You respond by building a system that supports and protects your talent. You respond with transparency and collaboration. You don't treat your stars like liabilities. The players know this. The fans are starting to know, and yet the league continues to act like it's the players putting everything at risk, when the biggest threat to the WNBA's future is the league's own refusal to evolve. And this is what makes Clark's refusal so, because it's not just about money. It's about power. It's about trust. It's about calling out the lie at the heart of the league's growth story, that the players should be content to build something they'll never fully benefit from. Clark said no, and now others are following her lead. 2. We're seeing players refusing to renew contracts. We're seeing calls for financial transparency. We're seeing athletes demand not just better, but a real share in the league's success. And for the first, ownership doesn't seem to know how to respond. Because the old tactics aren't working. The "you're lucky to be here" line doesn't land anymore. The vague, "we're just wait" promise isn't calming anyone down. And the strategy of blaming the players while hiding the books is becoming harder and harder to defend. People are asking better questions now. They want to know why a league that markets itself as progressive and empowering is still operating on a business model that treats its athletes like a cost to be minimized instead of partners in profit. They want to know what the league's real priorities are and whether the people in charge have the courage to do what's right. Because make no, this fight is about more than just the WNBA. It's about what happens when women in sports refuse to be, when they stop accepting scraps and start demanding what they're, when they look at a system built on underpayment and erasure and not anymore. Caitlin Clark could have taken the easy route. She could have signed the cash that played, and no one would have blamed her. But she didn't. She made a choice. A bold, a risky one. And now the league has to answer for the years it spent building a house of cards on the backs of underpaid labor and public goodwill. The players aren't asking for fantasy contracts. They're not demanding NBA salaries tomorrow. What they're asking for is a model that reflects the reality of where the league is, not where it was 20 years ago. They want a seat at the table. They want transparency. They want to know they're not just part of marketing, but a financial plan. And until that, this standoff will continue. 2. Let's get something straight. Caitlin Clark's refusal to sign the WNBA's new CBA didn't just send a message. It shattered the illusion. The illusion that this league can keep growing off the backs of its players without ever sharing the reward. The illusion that progress can be marketed but not paid for. The illusion that silence equals consent. That silence? It's gone. The players have spoken. The public is paying attention. And the league is on the defensive. Clark is doing what no one was supposed to do. Challenge the script. She's not just rejecting a contract. She's rejecting the entire premise that she should be grateful for crumbs while everyone else feasts. And for a league that's built its identity on empowerment and equity, the irony couldn't be more glaring. This is what happens when a star who moves the needle refuses to play the game behind it because Clark knows her worth. Everyone does. She's not just another draft pick. She's a media, a ratings, a once-in-a-generation, the kind of player who changes the trajectory of a league. The numbers back it up. Merchandise, social media, everything exploded the second her name entered the conversation. And when it comes to she's being treated like she's lucky to be here. That's not just disrespect, it's reckless. Because if Caitlin, the face of the league's future, isn't incentivized to buy into the system, who is? Kathy Engelbert speaks. Ownership's refusal to budge on revenue sharing tells you everything you need to know. Despite undeniable evidence that women's basketball is profitable, they're clinging to an old one that says the money's not really, one that demands trust but offers no proof. The players aren't buying it anymore, and neither should we. When you see expansion, when you see sponsors pouring, when you see franchise valuations, you don't need a business degree to understand what that means. The league isn't broke. It's booming. But the people cashing in aren't the ones breaking their backs on the court. That's the root of this entire. Players like Clark aren't just asking for better pay. They're asking for revenue, for accountability. Because if the league truly can't afford to share, why not open the books and prove it? But the league won't. Because transparency would dismantle the entire justification they've been using to suppress wages. It would expose the truth that the financial distress narrative isn't about survival. It's about power. Power to decide who gets what. Power to control the story. Power to frame any demand for fairness as a threat instead of a right. 2. Caitlin Clark's injury only made this more obvious. The moment she was sidelined, viewership took a hit, and ownership panicked. But instead of realizing just how crucial players like her are to the league, they twisted that panic into leverage. Her absence became a justification for not investing more in players. What if a star goes and they ask? We can't afford to pay more when the whole system is this fragile. But that argument only proves the player's point. If the league is so dependent on a few key names, then those names should be at the center of the financial, not the bottom. They should be compensated in a way that reflects their impact. They're being used to boost, to attract, to bring in, and then dismissed when it's time to discuss revenue. That's not just unfair. That's exploitation with a PR gloss. CC press conference and the media. Many outlets are still running interference for echoing the league's talking points, failing to question this, painting players as risky or combative for demanding what they've earned. It's a pattern we've seen, especially in women's sports. Frame any push for fairness as unreasonable. Stir fear. Suggest that asking for too much will jeopardize the league. But the real jeopardy isn't coming from the players. It's coming from leadership that refuses to evolve. Leadership that would rather protect margins than protect momentum. That's what makes this moment different. Caitlin Clark's decision is drawing a line in this, and the rest of the league is stepping across with her. Players are backing out of renewals. They're challenging the league not just but with evidence, pointing to the real numbers that ownership doesn't want to talk about. And fans are starting to wake up. People are asking why they're being told the league is in financial peril while simultaneously watching it thrive. They're questioning why the players they cheer for are being left out of the success they helped, because this isn't just about sports anymore. It's about labor. It's about equity. It's about the uncomfortable truth that even women can drive growth, command break, and still get left behind. Caitlin Clark refusing the CBA isn't a scandal. It's a one that's forcing the WNBA to look at itself and forcing all of us to ask why we've been so quick to accept a version of success that leaves its core contributors behind. This moment could change everything. If the league chooses to really and rework the system to reflect the reality of it could set a new standard for women's sports. One where players are treated as not just faces on a billboard, but if they keep pushing the same tired, hoping public pressure fades and players give in, then they're risking more than a contract. They're risking the very trust they've spent years trying to build. So now it's your move. What do you stand? Do you believe Caitlin Clark and her peers deserve a real seat at the table? Are you done with the secrecy, the manipulation? Hit the like button if you're with the players. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think. Share this with someone who still thinks they're asking for too much. And if you haven't, hit subscribe. We're not done telling the truth about this story. The old model is cracking, and the players aren't stepping back. They're stepping up. Keep watching. Keep questioning. Because it's not just historic, it's long overdue.